Hey, welcome back again. It's Brandon with Bling My Boat, and today we're going to walk through our first set of modifications that we performed here in SolidWorks to get my parts designed for fishing rod holders. So let's take a look. So for the first modification, of course, we're designing fishing rod holders, and I wanted a couple of options in my case, like I've mentioned before. So I started my design with the spare fishing rod holder. And you've seen a little bit of this in a previous video. It all started with a construction surface. So from the 3D scan of my kayak, I was able to use the slicing tool. Garrett and I both used pretty similar techniques in this case to map the contour of our kayak. And with that lofted surface, of course, you can trim it away to fit whatever shape it is you want. So I wanted kind of a nice little flange that will sit right on top of the kayak. I used just a simple circular profile to trim that surface. So using the trim surface command, you can pick and choose what regions of the surface you want to keep or remove. Pretty easy to move forward. The next step that I took, pretty simple here. I'm just going to offset a plane at some distance that will work to hold the handle of my fishing rod. And we'll bring back the kayak here just so we can kind of visualize, well, how far is the end of that tube going to stick into the kayak. So about 7.5 inches is what worked pretty well for my particular case. Once I was done with that, easy enough to just create a circular sketch on that plane and then loft a surface up to the flange that I created with the other lofted surface. And what we're going to do now is basically cap off the end of that little tube that we created there using a planar surface. So the surface plane command you can find right on your surfacing command manager. Pick an edge, cap off that surface, and then of course we've got to knit them together. So now it becomes one surface body. You can see that laminar edge is gone now, and it's just a single body that we're going to work with. I went ahead and filleted the bottom of that surface body just to kind of get it ready for the thickening operation, which we're going to do next. So the thicken operation is going to take that surface body and give it a thickness, so now we're dealing with a solid body. And the spare fishing rod holder is basically done at this point. However, we do have to consider, well, we're going to use additive manufacturing for this to actually 3D print it. And I didn't want a whole ton of supports being used underneath that flange. You can see just why it would be so tricky to actually 3D print if you're familiar with that. So what I ended up doing is offset the bottom of that flange to just recreate that surface. So if you didn't know this, you can use a 0 thickness offset to copy that surface and then use it for other things. So what I did was thicken it to create a representative of that little flange. And there were some other steps that I took basically to create these two bodies that I'm going to 3D print, but you can see where I'm going with that. We've got a flange and a tube that we can use. Similar methods there just by offsetting surfaces. And then each one we can save as an STL to send out to our 3D printer. Or in my case, I've got my 3D Walks add-in where I can just 3D print directly if I wanted to. But that's a spare fishing rod holder. So that one's basically done at this point. Let's bring back the kayak scan so we can see where we're going. Now up in the front, as I'm actually out on the water, I'm going to have my fishing rod in front of me. So here we're going to create another similar surface along the contour of the opening here in the kayak, the cockpit if you will. And again, similar method with this one. We'll use the slicing tool basically to cut through the mesh and take some of those contours into a surface loft, which will be pretty easy here. So let's roll back a little ways. You can see that I started with this bracket, and my thought was I wanted a modular design like I've mentioned before where I can snap on different attachments. I like to bring my Bluetooth speaker with me on the kayak sometimes, so maybe I want to create another attachment later. But it's going to begin, like I said, with the slicing tool to create that surface off of our scan data. Let's go ahead and get the kayak back out of the way so we can visualize that surface. The edges of that surface we'll clean up here in just a moment. You can see that from the profiles we created that loft with, the end of the profile, I wasn't real precise with it because I knew I was going to trim it away later. But if we take a look at those sketch profiles that were created from the slicing tool. You can see that I kind of used them as construction to begin with, as a matter of how we wanted to create the surfaces. Unchecking the exact profile option was better in my case, so I get kind of a smooth spline, but it wasn't precise enough, so I did end up kind of sketching in some of my own shapes. When we lofted that surface, of course, now you can pick and choose what portions of those sketches you wish to use, whether it's the original shape or the ones that you created on your own. It's up to you using that selection manager. That's pretty easy to do. And like I mentioned, we're going to trim away that surface pretty easily. What I did for the first portion of it was just follow my scan data, approximate a little curve here where I can trim out the surface using just a sketch spline or line. And then you can also take advantage of a reference plane if you wanted to. So that's how I trimmed away the bottom. Easy enough, a couple of trim operations and you're done to get that cleaned up. And then a similar method to what I did with other flanges for the rod holder on the back, we're going to thicken it and then create some features for mounting it. So using my hole wizard tool, of course I can take advantage of standard size slots if I wish to do so. So we put in a 1/4 inch slot here from the screw clearance options. And then I reuse some of those contours from that shape to create a little cut extrude here, offsetting some of those edges so I can actually slip it over a fastener and just kind of lock it in place without having to take the bolt in and out. Let's move forward a little bit. To create the ball mount feature, I ended up using just a thin extrude here from a single line sketch. So you can see we just approximated in a line there. And now I can actually use that in an extrude feature and give it thickness while I'm extruding it in 2 directions if I want. So I'll take a quick look at that feature here with you guys. So we're going to use the thin feature option. You can just check that box on and give it a thickness here. So I went with a 1/4 inch thin extrude feature and drafted some of those faces here as we move forward. Now the ball mount, I can do a simple revolve feature to actually create that shape that I'm looking for. And I ended up printing this on an SLA printer, the Formlabs Form 3. I wanted pretty good precision on that ball mount feature, so that's the reason I went with that method. Now once I've got all of this cleaned up a little bit and kind of smoothed out, I started modeling some of the other bodies, and you'll notice that they're not merged together with the bracket, and that's by design. I want to actually choose how I'm going to merge these bodies together, which is pretty simple to do after the fact. We can just use a simple combine feature. Notice here again, we're not using the merge result option, but the combine will come after that. So I'm going to take those 2 bodies, just kind of a conceptual block here, and then the cylinder for the rod holder. Let's go ahead and bring back some of these features here as we're going along. Okay, so now I've got my second body. And the reason I didn't merge them together to begin with is because I want to use a tool that's pretty frequently overlooked, but I find handy, the Indent tool. So I'm going to pick a target body and a tool body, and this allows me to remove material by using the same shape as another body in my design. So I can just pick that spherical face that I created, and then that will actually remove material from the target body. So you can see I get a nice little spherical indent there with a little bit of an offset. So if you want to put in like a 20 thousandths clearance or something like that, you'll be able to do that by using the indent feature. It's all built in right there. And then to make this kind of a snap-on feature, of course I removed some material to allow that to deform a little bit around the sphere shape. I've already got an indent feature created, so I'll go ahead and suppress the other one that I created previously. Now you see also there's a delete face operation after this. Why did we do that? Well, this has to do with the fact that the bodies I created for this rod holder were actually overlapping. So that cubic body that we created actually falls inside of the tube here. And what we can do is create a delete face feature to remove some of those faces. You can even go and search for this command up on your command search. That's easy enough to do. And then you're just going to pick the faces that you wish to remove from the design. So you don't have to create another cut feature or anything like that. You can just use the delete and patch option, and look, it cleans it up pretty nicely there. So that's definitely a handy tool. I like to use the delete face option quite a bit. So those are the two bodies that I need for my finished rod holder on the front of the kayak, using pretty similar methods for modification 1. I've got 2 locations that I'll take advantage of, but they all kind of started the same way, just simple slice data off of our 3D scan. Pretty easy. I hope you enjoyed checking out modification 1 with me. We've got a lot more in store for you, and we're going to show you exactly how we did it in the technical follow-up videos. So hopefully you learned something new that you can take back and use in SolidWorks right away. If you have any questions or other suggestions for us, leave us a comment down below. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next episode of Bling My Boat.